Picture New York City in 1890. Every day, ships arrived carrying thousands of Europeans who'd gambled everything on a fresh start. Between 1840 and 1910, over 4 million of them came through. What they found wasn't quite what they'd imagined. Take the Bohemian immigrants, Czechs and Slovaks mostly. They'd end up in tenement buildings where landlords divided single rooms into smaller and smaller spaces. Some of these rooms had no windows at all. You'd work 17 hours a day for wages that barely covered the rent, and if you couldn't speak English, well, you couldn't exactly argue about it. For many Bohemians, there was another problem: tobacco. They'd end up working in the cigar-making trade, often right there in their cramped apartments. That smell never left. It was in the walls, in your clothes, in your lungs. This is the story of those tenements and the people who lived in them. Okay, so, if you're here a lot, you know I ask for likes and subscribes. But seriously, where are you guys? Comment your location and time. Sometimes I see someone from California listening at 3 p.m. and I'm like, are you napping? All right, New York tenements in the 1800s tonight. But wait, are you comfortable? No, really, check. Pillows, blankets, the whole deal. Where we're going, you'll want to be settled. You wake up gasping, not from a nightmare, but from the air itself. Thick, brown, choking. Your lungs struggle to find anything resembling oxygen in this soup of tobacco dust. The smell has penetrated everything. Your clothes, your hair, your skin. After 6 months in this room, you can taste it even in your dreams. It's 4:30 in the morning, still dark outside, but your family can't afford to waste daylight. Not when every minute means pennies, and every penny stands between you and the street. You're awake because the coughing started again. Your father's deep, wet rattle from the corner where your parents sleep. Your mother stirs too, not because the coughing woke her, but because her body knows the schedule by now. Work begins before dawn. Welcome to 1879. Welcome to the tenements of New York's side. Welcome to life as a Bohemian immigrant. You swing your legs off the edge of the narrow bench where you and your 2 siblings sleep. Your feet touch the floorboards, sticky with tobacco sap. The room is maybe 15 feet by 15 feet, but it's not just a bedroom. It's kitchen, living room, dining room, and cigar factory all at once. Joseph, your mother whispers in Czech, get the water. You're 10 years old, but in this world, childhood is a luxury for rich Americans. You grab the bucket by the door and head down the dark hallway, past 6 other apartments just like yours. Inside each one, a family of 5, 6, sometimes 8 people, all waking up to the same routine, all choking on the same tobacco air. The communal water pump is in the backyard, 4 flights down. In winter, the trip is brutal. Tonight's September chill is just a warning of what's coming. You've been in America for 6 months, arrived from Bohemia, what some now call the Czech lands, with dreams your parents wouldn't even speak aloud. Dreams that have shriveled faster than the tobacco, leaves you stripped for 14 hours a day. Let me paint you a picture of what it was like back then, says my historian friend who spent 3 years researching these tenements. Imagine the worst apartment you've ever seen. Now remove the plumbing, add 6 more people, and fill it with toxic fumes. That was luxury compared to what these folks endured. The pump screeches as you work the handle. 3 other children from neighbouring apartments are already filling their buckets. Nobody speaks, partly because of exhaustion, partly because words feel wasted when your stomach's been empty since yesterday afternoon. You think about the bread your mother will slice for breakfast. 1 thin piece each, no butter. You think about the 12 hours ahead. your fingers working alongside your parents and sisters, stripping tobacco leaves, rolling cigars. Your hands permanently stain the colour of rust. Oh, and here's something they don't tell you in the history books. That tobacco stain, it never comes off. These cigar workers had permanently brown fingers their entire lives. Imagine walking around with hands that look like you'd been gardening in mud forever. That was their reality. Back in the apartment, your mother has already cleared the workbench of last night's sleeping blankets. Your 5-year-old sister is still asleep in the corner on a pile of tobacco sacks. She'll get another hour before she too joins the production line. Your father sits at the bench coughing into a rag. When he pulls it away, you pretend not to see the flecks of blood. Everyone knows what it means, but nobody says it. Consumption. The tuberculosis that claims so many in these buildings. The disease doctors now link directly to tobacco dust inhalation and the windowless rooms where you both work and sleep. "Good morning," he says in Czech, trying to sound strong. He's been in America 9 years and still can't speak more than 10 words of English. None of the adults in your community can. There's no time to learn, no opportunity to practice, and honestly, no point. Your world is these few blocks of the Lower East Side where Czech is the only language that matters. You pour water into the basin, splash your face, and take your place at the bench. The tobacco is already there, delivered last Friday from the manufacturer, the same man who is your landlord. He owns the building, provides the raw materials, and buys back the finished cigars. He sets the prices for both your rent and your work, and the math never adds up in your favour. Let's break down the economics, because this is where it gets really twisted. The typical Bohemian family paid between $10–12 per month in rent for a tenement apartment in the 1870s. For that same family making cigars, the going rate was about $3.75 per 1,000 cigars. Working from dawn until night, we're talking 17-hour days, a family might produce 3,000 cigars in a week, earning 11.25. So basically, after killing themselves for a solid week, they'd barely cover rent. Food, medicine, clothing, good luck. Your fingers start the familiar dance, separating leaf from stem, sorting by quality, preparing the wrapper, the binder, the filler. Every cigar a tiny work of craft that will sell for more money than you'll see in a day. "Hey, what's happening in the streets today?" your father asks. A morning ritual meant to distract from hunger and fatigue. You shrug. Mr. Novak says there's talk of another strike. The cigar makers on 38th Street want $5 per 1,000 instead of $3.75. Your father snorts. "And I want a mansion on 5th Avenue. Talking won't change anything." Your mother gives him a look. "Joseph is just answering your question." "And the landlord's just answering the market," your father says. "We ask for more money. He shows us the line of new arrivals getting off the boats, willing to work for less." He's right, of course. Every week more Bohemians arrive, each family more desperate than the last. The landlords know exactly what they're doing, keeping everyone just desperate enough to work, not quite desperate enough to rebel. The sun begins to creep through the building across the narrow alley, your only source of light. It barely qualifies as a window, just a small opening that gives you a view of the brick wall 12 feet away. In the summer, the heat is unbearable. In the winter, the cold seeps in. There is no good season in the tenements. As the light grows, you can see the full reality of your home. The walls, once white perhaps, have turned the colour of tobacco juice. The ceiling is cracked, with water stains from the leaking roof. In one corner, despite your mother's constant cleaning, a family of cockroaches has built a dynasty. They thrive on the tobacco scraps, unbothered by the poison that's slowly killing the humans. You're probably thinking, why didn't they just move somewhere else? Or, why not find different work? Trust me, they tried. The problem was threefold. First, they had no money to relocate. Second, they didn't speak English, which eliminated most jobs. And third, this is the kicker, many landlords were also the tobacco suppliers and cigar buyers, creating a closed system that was basically modern slavery. I interviewed an economist who specializes in 19th century labor conditions, and he told me, what the Bohemians experienced was a perfect trap. They were bound by language, geography, skill set, and economics. Breaking free required resources they couldn't possibly accumulate while caught in the system. By 7 a.m. the entire family's at work. Even little Anna, barely 5, sits on a small stool, carefully separating tobacco leaves and handing them to your mother. Your sister Maria, 12, is faster than you, her fingers flying over the workbench. She's been doing this since she was 4, doesn't remember a life before cigars. The building comes fully alive now. Through the thin walls you hear coughing, arguments, the crying of babies, the rhythmic sounds of work. Someone is singing a Czech folk song 3 apartments down, a mournful tune about homeland and loss. It makes your mother's eyes water, though she'll blame it on the tobacco dust. A loud knock at the door makes everyone jump. "Inspection," says your father grimly. The Board of Health occasionally sends inspectors to the tenements, not to help, but to ensure the cigars aren't being made under unsanitary conditions. The irony is staggering. The inspectors care about the cigars, not the people making them. Your mother hurriedly wipes down the workbench, kicks a pile of scraps under it, and opens the door with the closest thing to a smile she can manage. The inspector is American, tall and well-fed, his nose wrinkling at the smell that is your everyday existence. He barely glances at the room, makes a note on his clipboard and moves on. The entire inspection takes less than 30 seconds. "What did he write?" your sister asks. Your father shrugs. "Who knows? Something about us being dirty foreigners, probably." The reality was even worse than that. You know what Jacob Rees, the guy who eventually documented these conditions, discovered? That many inspectors were on the payroll of the same landlords they were supposed to be monitoring. The entire system was corrupt from top to bottom. By noon, your fingers are bleeding slightly where the tobacco sap has made the skin crack. This is normal. Everyone's hands look the same, calloused, stained, split at the knuckles and fingertips. Your stomach growls, but lunch is still an hour away. Through the small window comes a shout from the street, someone calling in Czech. Your father perks up, listens intently. "Strike," he translates, though everyone understood. The 38th Street factory is on strike. For a moment the work stops. Everyone looks at each other, the unspoken question hanging in the tobacco-thick air. Should we join them? Your father slowly shakes his head. "We can't afford it," he says simply, and returns to his work. Your mother doesn't argue, but you see something in her eyes, a flash of anger, quickly suppressed. She's the one who keeps the family's meagre accounts. She knows better than anyone how precarious your situation is. In your pocket is the rent receipt from last week, $11.75 for one room with a small window. The cigars you'll make this week might bring in $11.25 if you work from dawn until midnight every day. The math is simple and brutal. You will always be in debt to the landlord. At 1 o'clock your mother slices the dark bread, 1 piece each, with a thin scraping of lard if you're lucky. Sometimes there's a pickle to share. Today there isn't. This is going to sound weird, but one of the most valuable skills in a tenement was knowing how to slice bread thin enough that it seemed like more than it was. People literally developed techniques to make 5 slices look like 10. That's the level of poverty we're talking about. I heard from Mrs. Svoboda that her cousin found work in a restaurant, your mother says quietly, the words almost conspiratorial. Real work, away from tobacco. Your father nods but says nothing. Everyone knows the story of Mr. Holub, who tried to leave cigar making for construction work. The landlord evicted his family the next day. They spent 3 nights on the street before Mr. Holub begged for his cigar job back, at a lower rate than before. After lunch, if you can call it that, it's back to work. The afternoon drags, the air getting thicker as the room heats up. By 3 o'clock, little Anna is asleep at her station, her small face pressed against the workbench. Your mother gently moves her to the corner sleeping area without breaking her own rhythm. Through the walls, you hear Mrs. Novak in the next apartment begin another coughing fit. It goes on for nearly 5 minutes. Nobody mentions that these fits have been getting worse for weeks. Nobody mentions that Mr. Dvořák upstairs had similar coughing before they took him away last month. He never came back. Okay, so you know how when you get a cold and your chest feels tight for a few days, multiply that by 1,000 and make it permanent. That's what chronic tobacco exposure did to these workers. Their lungs were literally coated with the stuff. Modern doctors who've studied the autopsies say their lung tissue looked like cured meat. At 6 o'clock there's another knock. Not an inspector this time, but the tobacco delivery man. He brings the week's supply and takes away the finished cigars, counting them meticulously. This week, 2,170 cigars. Not enough for what you need. Short again, he says in broken English, one of the few phrases he's bothered to learn in your language. Boss not happy. Your father nods grimly. We'll make more next week. The man leaves, and your father's shoulders slump. We need to work longer tonight, he says, though everyone is already exhausted. We worked until midnight all last week, your mother points out. Then we work until 1, your father snaps, then softens. Just until we catch up. But everyone in the room knows a terrible truth. You will never catch up. The system is designed that way. Dinner is bean soup, watery but hot. Your mother saves most of her portion for your father, who needs strength to keep working despite his worsening cough. You all eat at the workbench, careful not to spill on the tobacco. Through the small window you can see lights coming on in the tenement across the alley. In one room, a family of 8 gathers around their own workbench. In another, a woman rocks, a crying baby while 3 other children sleep on the floor beside her. These glimpses into other lives identical to yours are your only entertainment, your only connection to a world outside your own walls. The night deepens, and still you work. Your eyes burn from strain and tobacco dust. Your back aches from hunching over. Your fingers move mechanically now, muscle memory taking over where conscious thought has surrendered to fatigue. At 11, little Anna wakes up crying from hunger. Your mother gives her the crust of bread she'd saved from her own lunch. It quiets the child, but everyone feels the pain of not having enough. Not enough food, not enough space, not enough money, not enough hope. The landlord, who stops by sometimes in the evening to check on production, pokes his head in around midnight. He's a large man, Czech like you but different. He came 20 years earlier, learned English, figured out how to become the exploiter rather than the exploited. "Still working?" he asks, sounding pleased. "Good, good. Need more cigars this week." He doesn't mention that last week he raised the rent another 25 cents, or that the price he pays for cigars has dropped again. He doesn't have to. Everyone understands the arrangement. After he leaves, your father mutters something under his breath, a Czech curse that would earn you a slap if you repeated it. "He was one of us once," your mother says quietly. "I remember when he first came to New York. He lived in a room like this." "And now he owns the building," your father replies bitterly, "because he climbs on the backs of his own people." This was common, by the way. Some of the worst exploiters of immigrants were earlier immigrants from the same countries. They knew exactly how to manipulate the system and their countrymen. By 1 in the morning, even your father admits defeat. The day's work has yielded another 150 cigars. Not enough, never enough, but all that human exhaustion can produce. Your mother clears the workbench, lays out the thin blankets that transform it into a bed for you and your sister. Little Anna is already asleep in the corner. Your parents will sleep on the floor tonight. Your father's cough is too bad for him to lie flat. As you stretch out on the hard wooden surface, your body aches with a tiredness that sleep can't cure. Tomorrow will be the same, and the day after, and every day until what? Until your father's cough takes him, until the landlord raises the rent beyond even your 17-hour work days? Until some miracle no one really believes in anymore? You close your eyes, but the smell of tobacco follows you even into your dreams. It's in your clothes, your hair, under your fingernails. You've forgotten what clean air tastes like, what food tastes like without the flavour of tobacco overlaying everything. Through the walls, someone is crying. Someone is always crying in the tenements. You drift towards sleep, your last conscious thought, a question that has no answer. How did we trade one prison for another? How did we cross an ocean for freedom, only to be trapped more completely than before? As you drift off on your hard bench covered with a thin blanket, surrounded by the rank smell of tobacco that will follow you all your life, I want you to think about something. Right now, in your comfortable bed, with your clean air and full stomach, you're experiencing more luxury than these people could even imagine. That's the thing about history. We think of these people as characters in a story, but they were as real as you and I, with dreams and fears and the desperate hope that tomorrow might somehow be better than today. But for the Bohemians of New York's tenements, tomorrow was almost always exactly the same as yesterday. An endless cycle of work, exploitation, and survival on the razor's edge between subsistence and starvation. And as night falls on the Lower East Side, thousands of families just like yours settle into uneasy sleep, surrounded by the tools of their trade and the inescapable smell of the tobacco that is both their livelihood and their slow death. Morning arrives like it always does in the tenements, announced not by sunlight, which barely penetrates your narrow window, but by the sounds. First, the coughing, dozens of tobacco-scarred lungs clearing themselves across the building. Then the water pumps squeaking, the hallway floorboards creaking, babies crying, and finally the rhythmic sounds of work beginning. Your father is already at the workbench when you open your eyes, his silhouette hunched over tobacco leaves in the dim light. He didn't sleep again. The cough kept him sitting upright all night. "Dobre rano," he says without looking up. "Good morning." You stretch your aching back. The workbench makes for a hard bed, but it's better than the floor where your mother slept with little Anna. Maria is already up too, splashing water on her face from the basin. The Novaks got evicted last night, she whispers. I heard them being put out. Your stomach tightens. The Novaks live 2 doors down, a family with 5 children. Mr. Novak had been sick, unable to work for nearly a month. Where will they go, you ask? Maria shrugs. The street, the poorhouse. Does it matter? They're gone. And that's the thing about tenement life that history books can't quite capture. The constant terror. One missed rent payment, one bad week of production, one illness, and you'd be on the street. No safety net, no savings, no second chances. Your father overhears. This is why we work, he says, his voice flat. This is why we don't join strikes. Your mother stirs from her place on the floor, her face lined with exhaustion. At 35, she looks 20 years older. She was beautiful once. There's a small photograph from the old country that proves it. 6 years in the tenements have worn that beauty away, replaced it with a permanent mask of fatigue. We should wash the bedding today, she says, ignoring the conversation about the Novaks. It's been 3 weeks. The unspoken reality is that washing the bedding means losing at least 2 hours of work, 2 hours of production, money the family can't spare. After we finish this bundle, your father replies, nodding at the tobacco. We're still short from last week. You take your place at the bench as the small room fills with morning light, though light is a generous description for the grimy illumination that filters through your one window. The familiar smell of tobacco wraps around you, so constant you only notice it now in the first moments after waking. Grab the water, Josef, your mother says, and you head out with the bucket. The hallway tells its own stories this morning. The Novak's door stands open, the small room already being cleared of their meagre possessions. 2 men you don't recognize are carrying out a broken chair. They don't look at you. At the end of the hall, old Mrs. Dvořák sits on the floor outside her apartment, softly crying. Her son was taken to the hospital yesterday. Everyone knows what that means. Nobody has money for hospitals until it's too late, and few come back. The hallway itself is a health hazard, narrow, with peeling wallpaper and floorboards that sag underfoot. The shared toilet at the end serves 28 people across 5 apartments. It hasn't worked properly in months, and the stench competes even with the tobacco smell. I visited a preserved tenement museum in New York a few years back, and let me tell you, even the cleaned-up museum version was shocking. The original toilets were basically holes in the ground located in the backyard. By the 1870s, they'd upgraded to shared hallway toilets, but those were often broken, and one toilet might serve 20-30 people. Imagine your worst public bathroom nightmare, then multiply it by 10. You carefully step around a puddle of something you don't want to identify and make your way down the 4 flights of stairs. Each floor houses similar stories. The immigrants might come from different parts of Europe, but the conditions are universal. Poverty speaks its own language. In the backyard, which is really just a small concrete area surrounded by towering tenement walls, the water pump is busy this morning. A line of 5 people wait with buckets. You recognize Mrs. Cherney from the 2nd floor, her infant strapped to her chest. Her husband was a blacksmith in Bohemia, a skilled tradesman. Here he rolls cigars in their apartment because his lack of English makes other work impossible. How is Jan? You ask in Czech. Her husband has been coughing worse than your father. She doesn't meet your eyes. The same. You wait your turn, fill your bucket, and begin the long climb back up. By the time you reach your apartment on the 4th floor, your arms ache and half the water has sloshed out despite your careful steps. This trip happens 4 or 5 times a day, more if someone is sick and needs extra washing. Up and down, bucket by bucket. Just one of the countless inefficiencies that keep tenement life balanced on the edge of impossible. Back in your apartment, the day's work has begun in earnest. Your mother has cleared the sleeping blankets and laid out fresh tobacco leaves. The leaves arrive damp and need to be dried to the perfect consistency. Too wet and the cigar won't burn properly. Too dry and it burns too quickly. "Look at this," your father says, holding up a mouldy leaf. "They're sending us the worst quality now." Your mother examines it with practiced eyes. "We can still use most of it. Just cut away the bad parts." He makes a disgusted sound, but does as she suggests. You all know you can't afford to waste anything. The reality of cigar making in tenements was this constant compromise. Companies would send lower quality tobacco to the home workers, saving the premium leaves for their factory operations. The tenement cigar makers had to make do with whatever they got, and still produce perfect cigars. Your sister Maria has already begun stripping leaves, her fingers moving with practiced precision. At 12, she's been doing this work for 8 years. She doesn't remember a time before tobacco stained her hands. "I heard something yesterday," she says, not looking up from her work. "Mrs. Svoboda says there's a school for immigrant children. Free." Your father snorts. "Nothing is free. The Americans run it, to teach English." Your mother glances up briefly. "We need her hands here." And that's the conversation. A child's hope raised and crushed in the space of seconds. Education is a luxury that belongs to different people in a different world. Here, small fingers stripping tobacco leaves are worth more than minds learning to read. I talked to a historian who specializes in immigrant education, and she told me that many Bohemian families desperately wanted education for their children, but literally couldn't afford to lose the labor. A child in school meant maybe 20% less family income, and when you're already barely surviving, that's impossible. The morning passes in the familiar rhythm of work. Strip the leaves, sort them by size and quality. Prepare the fillers, the inner tobacco that gives the cigar its body. Roll the binder leaf around the filler to hold it together. Then the final step, the wrapper leaf, the visible outer skin of the cigar that must be perfect, without tears or blemishes. Your father handles the wrapper work. Despite his illness, his fingers still possess the delicate touch needed. Your mother prepares the fillers. You and Maria strip and sort. Little Anna, now awake, sits on her small stool picking out stems and veins from the leaves, work suitable for 5-year-old fingers. The room grows warmer as the day progresses. Sweat beads on your forehead, making your eyes sting when tobacco dust mixes with it. There's no ventilation beyond the single window, which offers little relief. In summer, the temperature inside can reach 100 degrees. In winter, it barely rises above freezing. At noon, there's a knock on the door. Everyone freezes. "Rent," says a voice in accented English. Your father nods to your mother, who goes to the battered tin box kept under a floorboard. From it she removes a carefully counted stack of coins. $11.75, nearly every cent the family has. When she opens the door, the landlord, Mr. Kaufman, barely looks at her, just holds out his hand for the money. He's a large man with a prosperous belly and fingers adorned with gold rings. 20 years ago he arrived from Prague just like your family. Now he owns half the building and supplies tobacco to most its residents. "Still sick?" he asks, glancing at your father. "Getting better," your father lies. Kaufman grunts. "Production was down last week. We'll make it up. You'd better. New family arrived yesterday from Praha. 6 people, 3 adults who can roll. They're looking for work and space. The threat doesn't need to be spelled out. There's always someone more desperate willing to take your place. After he leaves, your mother's hand trembles as she shuts the door. We don't have money for food now. Your father doesn't look up from his work. We still have some bread, and I'll ask Pani Horakova if she can spare potatoes. Her son sends her money sometimes. This was the brutal reality. Rent always came first, no matter what. Food was the flexible expense. People literally starved to keep roofs over their heads. The afternoon drags on. Through the open window comes the sound of street vendors, children playing, horses clopping on cobblestones, the life of the city continuing beyond the walls of your workroom prison. You ventured into those streets exactly twice since arriving 6 months ago. Once to help carry home a large tobacco shipment. Once to help the Dvořáks when their son collapsed on the stairway. The rest of your existence happens within these 4 walls. My hands are sticky, little Anna complains, holding up fingers coated with tobacco residue. Your mother wipes them with a damp cloth. Just a few more hours, Milachku. By 4 o'clock, hunger has become a hard knot in your stomach. The last proper meal was yesterday's lunch. Your mother notices you slowing down. Take a piece of bread, she says quietly, just a small one. The loaf is stale and hard down to the last few slices. You break off a piece the size of 2 fingers and chew it slowly, making it last. The taste of tobacco clings even to the food. It's in the air, on your hands, everywhere. Another knock on the door makes everyone tense again. But this time it's Mrs. Horakova from upstairs, her round face appearing when your mother opens the door. I heard the Novaks, she says without preamble. Is it true? Your mother nods. Mrs. Horakova makes the sign of the cross. God help them. She lowered her voice. I heard Kaufmann already has a new family moving in. 7 people? 7? In that room? Your mother's voice betrays her shock. The Novak's apartment is even smaller than yours. 3 children, 4 adults, from Plzeň. She hesitates, then adds, I have some soup. I can share. That night, your dinner is a watery potato soup brought by Mrs. Horakova, stretched with the last of your stale bread. It fills your stomach without truly satisfying, but it's more than you expected. These small kindnesses are what keep tenement families alive, the invisible network of shared resources, borrowed cups of flour, divided loaves of bread. After dinner, work continues. Nobody in the tenements can afford to respect conventional working hours. Every waking moment is potential production time. Every idle hand a luxury. Tell me about Bohemia again, little Anna says as she sorts leaves by lamplight. About our village. Your mother's expression softens for the first time today. It was green. So green your eyes would hurt from looking at the fields, and in spring, flowers covered the hills like coloured blankets. Why did we leave? Annie asks, though she's heard the answer many times. Because there was no food, your father answers bluntly. No work. The landlord took everything, and then wanted more. Like here, you say without thinking. Your father looks at you sharply but doesn't contradict. The parallels are too obvious. One form of exploitation traded for another. My great-grandfather came from Eastern Europe around this time, and he used to say, we didn't escape poverty. We just moved it to a different country where we couldn't even read the signs. At 8 o'clock, there's a commotion in the hallway. Voices raised, a child crying. Your mother cracks the door to look out. The new family, she reports, moving into the Novak's room. You all listen to the sounds of furniture being dragged, children being shushed. 7 people in a space barely big enough for 4. Tomorrow they'll begin the same cycle of tobacco and debt that claim the Novaks. When Mrs. Horakova comes to retrieve her soup pot, she lingers in the doorway. They're saying things might change, she says in a hushed voice. A man was in the street today talking about organizing, about unions. Your father looks up. The unions don't want us. They call us rate busters. The term is bitter in his mouth. The established cigar makers' unions have long viewed Bohemian immigrants as enemies who undercut wages by accepting lower pay. They don't acknowledge the impossible situation that without English, without other options, any work at any wage is better than none. This was different, Mrs. Horakova insists. This man spoke Czech. He talked about all workers together. For a moment, something like hope flickers across your father's face. Then he shakes his head and returns to his work. Talk is cheap. Rent is expensive. After Mrs. Horakova leaves, the atmosphere in a room changes. Something has been introduced. A dangerous idea, a possibility. No one mentions it directly, but it hangs in the air alongside the tobacco dust. At 10 o'clock, little Anna falls asleep at her station, her small head nodding forward onto the bench. Your mother carries her to the corner sleeping space, a grim smile touching her lips as she brushes hair from the child's forehead. She looks like my mother, she whispers, around the eyes. These moments of tenderness are rare treasures in tenement life, brief reminders that behind the work-roughened hands and tobacco-stained fingers are human beings with memories, with histories. By 11, your own eyes are struggling to stay open. The day's production sits in neat piles, 470 cigars. Not enough, never enough. Go to sleep, your father says suddenly. All of you. I'll finish this batch. You need rest, your mother argues. Your cough. I'll rest when we've made quota. Go. The tone of his voice makes clear this isn't a suggestion. Your mother hesitates, then begins clearing part of the workbench for you and Maria to sleep on. She and Anna will take the floor corner again. As you lay your tired body on the hard bench, covered only by a thin blanket, the sounds of the tenement create their nightly symphony. Arguments and love-making, children crying and old people praying, drunken singing and quiet sobbing, all filter through walls thin enough to pass tobacco smoke. From your father comes the steady sound of work, leaves being stripped, wrappers being rolled, the quiet desperation of a man trying to outwork death itself. He's getting worse, Maria whispers beside you, quiet enough that only you can hear. I know. What will we do if... She doesn't finish the sentence. You have no answer. Without your father, the family production will drop by at least a third. With it, any hope of meeting the rent, of feeding 5 mouths. The ash barrels that stand in front of the big rows of tenements on 71st and 73rd Streets tell their own stories, filled to the brim with the stems of stripped tobacco leaves. Even the garbage of the tenements is marked by the industry that both sustains and kills its residents. Through a small window you can see lights still burning in apartments across the narrow alley. Other families, other workbenches, other lives mirror to your own. The woman directly across hasn't left her apartment in the 3 months you've been watching. She sits at her bench 18 hours a day, rolling cigars with mechanical precision, a living automaton. Your eyes grow heavy as your father's silhouette continues its work in the lamplight. His cough punctuates the night, but his hands never stop moving. In the morning you find him still at the bench, slumped forward, finally overcome by exhaustion. The night's work. Another 100 cigars, neatly piled beside him. Your mother places a gentle hand on his shoulder, and he starts awake, immediately reaching for more tobacco. "Enough," she says softly. "Rest now. We'll continue." For once he doesn't argue. He makes his way to the corner space vacated by Anna, who's already at her station sorting leaves. He lies down and is asleep within seconds, his breathing ragged and shallow. The rank smell from the workbench follows you into the hallway as you go for the morning water. It's in your clothes, your hair, under your fingernails. You've forgotten what clean air tastes like, what food tastes like, without the flavour of tobacco overlaying everything. On the stairs, you pass one of the new family's children, a boy about your age, with the same hollow-cheeked hunger you see in the mirror. He nods slightly in recognition of a shared fate. It's not always like this, you want to tell him, but that would be a lie. It is always like this. Day after day, leaf after leaf, cigar after cigar. As you fill your water bucket in the yard, you notice a piece of paper nailed to the pump. It's written in Czech, the letters carefully formed. Meeting tonight, church basement on Orchard Street. For all cigar workers, united we stand. You stare at it for a long moment, memorizing the words, before continuing back upstairs with your water. You won't mention it to your father, not yet, but you tuck the information away, a tiny seed of possibility in the barren soil of tenement life. Back in the apartment, the day's work has already begun. Your mother has taken your father's place at the wrapper station, though her fingers lack his practiced skill. Maria strips leaves faster than ever, making up for lost time. The routine continues, the same as yesterday, the same as tomorrow. Strip the leaves, sort them, roll them, repeat, the cigar maker's endless cycle. But something has changed. A current of tension, of possibility, runs beneath the surface. The whispered conversations in the hallway, the paper on the pump, the new family arriving even as the old one was forced out. The system that keeps you trapped depends on isolation, on the belief that there is no alternative. But what if there is? What if Mrs. Horakova is right, and things could change? As you take your place at the workbench, your hands automatically resuming their familiar tasks, you allow yourself something dangerous, a small, fragile hope that tomorrow might be different from today. Even as the tobacco dust settles on your skin and the familiar smells wrap around you like prison walls. The next morning begins like all others, in darkness, with the taste of tobacco already in your mouth before you've even opened your eyes. But today carries something different. The paper on the pump, the whispers in the hallway, the meeting. Your father is still asleep when the rest of you begin work, his body finally surrendering to the exhaustion and illness he's been fighting for months. His cough punctuates the quiet morning like a grim metronome. "Let him rest," your mother says when you glance at his corner. "We'll manage." And so the day begins with just 4 pairs of hands instead of 5, a devastating reduction in a family that needs every finger working to survive. The process of making cigars is both art and torture, a skilled craft performed under impossible conditions. The tobacco arrives damp, the leaves entire. Before anything else can happen, it must be prepared. "Joseph, sort these," your mother says, pushing a pile of leaves toward you. Wrappers separate from fillers. This is the first step, identifying which leaves are suitable for the outer wrapper. the visible skin of the cigar, and which will go inside as filler. Wrapper leaves must be perfect. No tears, no holes, no discoloration. Imperfect leaves become fillers, the invisible interior. You thumb through the pile, your hands automatically separating the leaves into categories: wrapper, binder, which holds the filler together, and filler. Your fingers are so stained with tobacco that they look like they're wearing brown gloves, permanent discoloration that marks cigar workers as clearly as a brand. Wait, I need to tell you something wild about this tobacco staining. When Bohemian immigrants tried to get other jobs, employers would immediately spot their permanently stained hands and know they were cigar workers. It was like a tattoo they couldn't escape. Some would try scrubbing their skin raw with lye soap, but the stain had penetrated too deeply. While you sort, Maria works on stripping, removing the thick centre vein from each leaf. She uses a small stumpy knife with a worn wooden handle, her fingers moving with practiced precision. The veins pile up in a basket to be discarded in the ash barrels outside. Little Anna's job is simpler but crucial. She sorts the stripped leaves by size, creating neat piles that will later become different sizes of cigars. Her small fingers work diligently, though she frequently stops to wipe her eyes, irritated by the tobacco dust that hangs in the air like a toxic fog. Your mother has taken over your father's role at the rolling station. This is the most skilled part of the process, where flat leaves become the finished product. She begins with the filler, carefully arranging the tobacco to ensure it will draw properly when lit. Too loose, and it burns too quickly. Too tight, and it won't draw at all. Around the filler goes the binder leaf, rolled to create the basic shape. Then comes the wrapper, the outer leaf that must be applied with perfect smoothness, no wrinkles, no tears. She uses a natural vegetable gum to seal it, then trims the ends with a circular cutter called a guillotine. "Not tight enough," she mutters, undoing a cigar and starting again. Your father could roll 4 in the time it takes her to perfect one. The room is eerily quiet without your father's stories. Usually he fills the monotony with tales of the old country or songs from his youth. Without him, there's only the sound of work, leaves being torn, knives scraping, the soft thud of the guillotine trimmer. By mid-morning your fingers are already aching. The tobacco sap makes them sticky, and the constant fine movements leave your joints stiff. The dust makes your eyes water and your throat scratch. But stopping isn't an option. "How many did we make yesterday?" Anna asks, breaking the silence. 570, your mother answers. "We need at least that many today." The math is simple and brutal. At $3.75 per 1,000 cigars, that's barely $2.14 for a day's work by 5 people. Less than 43 cents per person for a 17-hour day. And from that must come rent, food, clothes, everything. You know, I actually calculated this once. Adjusted for inflation, these families were making about 60 cents per hour in today's money. Imagine working 17 hours to earn $10. That was their reality. A knock at the door startles everyone. Your mother quickly wipes her hands on her apron and answers it. Standing there is the boy you saw on the stairs yesterday, the one from the new family. "My mother asks if you have thread," he says in Czech, his accent marking him as from a different region than your family. "Our baby's shirt is torn." Your mother hesitates only briefly before retrieving a small spool of thread from a box under the bench. Thread is precious, used for clothes, for emergency repairs, occasionally even for binding cigars when the vegetable gum runs low. But in the tenements, these small kindnesses are survival currency. "Tell her she can keep it," your mother says, pressing the spool into the boy's hand. "And what is your name?" "Tomasz," he replies. "We're from Plzeň. Come back later if you need anything else," your mother tells him. After he leaves, she explains, "They're new. They don't know yet how things work." This subtle dance of resources, knowing who has what, who needs what, when to share and when to hoard, is crucial to tenement survival. No family has enough on their own. Only through careful sharing can anyone survive. By noon, your father finally wakes, his face grey with exhaustion despite the hours of sleep. He tries to take his place at the bench, but your mother firmly directs him to the single chair by the window. "Count and pack today," she tells him. "Your hands aren't steady enough for rolling." He starts to argue, but is interrupted by a coughing fit so severe it leaves him gasping. When he pulls the rag from his mouth, fresh blood stains the fabric. Everyone pretends not to notice. The packing and counting is the final stage of production. Each cigar must be inspected for flaws, then arranged in bundles of 50 for delivery to the buyer. It's less physically demanding work, but requires focus to ensure consistent quality. One bad cigar can result in an entire bundle being rejected, work and materials wasted. Your father sits by the window, carefully examining each cigar, arranging them in neat rows. His fingers, once the fastest and most skilled in the family, now tremble slightly. "What's happening at the factory?" he asks, trying to sound casual. "I heard there was a strike starting." Your mother gives you a sharp look that clearly says, "Don't mention the meeting." "Just talk," she replies. "Nothing will come of it." But something has shifted in the building. You can feel it in the air, hear it in the hushed conversations that stop when doors open. The isolation that has kept the Bohemian workers divided is cracking, just slightly. The afternoon drags on, each hour marked by the changing angle of the meagre sunlight through your small window. By 4 o'clock you've made only 320 cigars, far below the needed pace. "We need to work faster," your father says, stating the obvious. "We're doing our best," your mother replies, an edge to her voice that rarely appears. The tension in the room rises with the heat. Without enough output, there won't be enough money for both rent and food next week. Everyone knows this. No one says it. At 5 o'clock there's another knock, but this time it's Mrs. Horakova. Her expression is tense, her voice low. "They're looking for people attending the meeting," she whispers. "Kaufmann has men watching the church." Your mother's face drains of colour. "We weren't going." Mrs. Horakova looks sceptical but nods. "Just warning you. 3 families on the second floor got eviction notices today. They were seen talking to the organisers." After she leaves, your father explodes in a rare display of anger. "This is why we keep to ourselves. This is why we don't listen to these union agitators." "And how is that working for us?" your mother snaps back. "Look at you. Look at the children. We're dying here, Joseph." The outburst shocks everyone into silence. Your mother never raises her voice, never challenges your father. The unspoken fear that has been building for months has finally found words. Your father stares at her for a long moment, then turns back to his cigars without replying. What can he say? She's right. The evening meal is a nearly silent affair, a thin potato soup with the last of the stale bread. Nobody mentions the meeting, or the evictions, or the blood on your father's handkerchief. The only sound is spoons against bowls and Anna's occasional cough, which has recently begun to mirror her father's. I talked to a doctor once about what tobacco dust does to children's lungs. She said it's basically like growing up in a house where everyone smokes 3 packs a day, except worse. because the particles are much finer and get deeper into the lungs. Kids who grew up making cigars had the lung capacity of heavy smokers by age 10. After dinner, work resumes, but the rhythm has changed. Your mother now sits at the main rolling station. Maria and Anna continue sorting and stripping, while you've been promoted to binder, wrapping the inner leaf around the filler tobacco to create cigar structure. Your father still sits by the window, inspecting and counting, but his movements have slowed. Occasionally he simply stares out at the darkening sky, his expression unreadable. At 7 o'clock you hear noises from the street, voices raised in argument, then a woman crying. Your father motions for you to look out. From your 4th-floor window you can see a family being evicted, furniture and belongings piled haphazardly on the sidewalk, children huddled together on a mattress, a woman pleading with the impassive landlord. You recognize them from the 2nd floor, the Baraneks, a family with 4 children. They were at the cigar factory last week, your father says quietly, talking about better wages. Everyone watches in silence as the family's life is dismantled before their eyes. This is the eternal threat that hangs over every tenement family. One complaint, one missed payment, one act of resistance, and you join the ranks of the truly desperate, the homeless. Back to work, your mother finally says, turning away from the window. We need 200 more before midnight. The work continues by lamplight, the small flame casting long shadows across the room. Your fingers move mechanically now, muscle memory taking over where conscious thought surrenders to exhaustion. Strip, sort, bind, wrap, cut, inspect, pack, repeat, repeat, repeat. The ritual of cigar making has a hypnotic quality. The same movements performed thousands of times create a state almost like dreaming while awake. Sometimes, in these evening sessions, you find your mind wandering back to Bohemia, to green fields and clear air, to the taste of food that isn't permeated with tobacco. You're startled from this reverie by a sound at the door, not a knock, but a soft scratching. Your father motions for everyone to be quiet, then carefully opens it. Standing there is Tomasz, the boy from the new family. His eyes are wide with fear. My father says to warn you, he whispers. Men are checking apartments tonight, looking for union papers. Your father nods his thanks and closes the door. Hide the tobacco, he says immediately, under the blankets. Make it look like we're just sleeping. You all scramble to conceal the evidence of work, the loose tobacco, the tools, the finished cigars. These midnight inspections happen occasionally, not to check living conditions, but to ensure families aren't working beyond their assigned quotas or selling directly to other buyers. Within minutes, the apartment has been transformed from workshop back to living space. The tobacco is hidden under floorboards and blankets, the finished cigars stashed in the small space above the ceiling boards. Your mother has even managed to wipe down the workbench, removing the most obvious tobacco residue. When the heavy knock comes 10 minutes later, you're all sitting on the floor sharing a cup of weak tea, the picture of a family evening. The door opens to reveal Kaufmann and 2 men you don't recognize. Larger, tougher-looking, probably hired muscle. Evening check, Kaufmann announces, pushing past your father into the apartment. His eyes sweep the room, looking for evidence of illicit work or union materials. You're not working? He asks suspiciously. My health, your father replies, coughing as if on cue. We needed rest tonight. Kaufmann's eyes narrow. Interesting time to rest, with the quota short. We'll make it up tomorrow. One of the men is opening cupboards, looking under the bench, even checking the small box where you store personal items. The other stands by the door, blocking any escape. There's talk of troublemakers, Kaufman says casually. People forgetting their place, getting ideas. We mind our own business, your father assures him. Good. See that you keep it that way. Kaufman gestures to his men. These gentlemen will be watching the building, for your protection, of course. After they leave, no one moves for several long minutes, afraid they might return. Finally, your mother lets out a breath she's been holding. They're scared, she says. The owners, they wouldn't do this if they weren't afraid. Your father says nothing, just begins retrieving the hidden tobacco. The night's work isn't finished, inspection or no inspection. As you help uncover the workbench, you find your thoughts returning to the paper on the pump. The meeting that's happening right now, while you're here hiding tobacco from the man who both supplies it and charges you rent for the privilege of working with it. The injustice of it all hits you anew. Not just the conditions, the tiny room, the endless work, the sickness, but the deliberate designed trap of it. The system that ensures you can never get ahead, never save enough to escape, never even learn the language that might offer a way out. By 10 o'clock everyone is back at work, the brief interruption forgotten in the need to meet quota. Your father has returned to the rolling station, ignoring your mother's objections, his experienced hands nearly doubling the production speed despite his shaking fingers. Through the walls come the muffled sounds of similar scenes playing out across the building. Families rushing to complete their own quotas after the inspection delay. The entire tenement is a factory that never closes, its workers unable to even strike without making themselves homeless. At midnight, your father finally calls a halt. Enough, he says, surveying the day's production. 510. It will have to do. Not enough to meet the quota, not enough to cover next week's expenses, but all that human bodies pushed to their limits can produce. As the family prepares for sleep, clearing, part of the workbench for you and Maria, arranging blankets for your parents and Anna in the corner, you notice your father pull your mother aside, speaking to her in a whisper too low to hear. Her expression changes from surprise to concern to a grudging agreement. She glances at you, then nods at whatever he's proposing. Later, as you lie on the hard bench beside your sister, you hear your parents talking in the darkness. It's dangerous, your mother says. More dangerous than this, your father replies. Look at Anna's cough. Look at my lungs. We'll all end up in the ground if something doesn't change. And if we're evicted, where will we go? We'll find something. The Horrocks did, after they left. The Horrocks had relatives uptown. The conversation continues in circles, neither willing to concede, neither able to offer a perfect solution to an impossible situation. Eventually they fall silent, exhaustion claiming them both. But the next morning, as you return from fetching water, your father is waiting by the door. You saw that paper? He asks quietly. The one on the pump? You nod, surprised. There's another meeting, tonight. I want you to go. Your shock must show on your face because he continues quickly. Not me. They know my face, and your mother needs to stay with the little ones. But you could slip in. Listen, come back and tell us. What about the men watching the building? Mrs. Horokova says they leave for a drink around 9. You can go then. Just listen, Josef. Find out what they're planning. And so, for the first time in your 6 months in America, you have a purpose beyond endless cigar rolling. You have a mission, a dangerous one, yes, but also the first hint of something beyond the suffocating routine of tobacco and sleep. That day, the work seems different somehow. Your fingers still strip and sort, your lungs still burn with tobacco dust, but your mind is elsewhere. imagining what might happen tonight, what you might hear, what possibilities might exist beyond these four walls. Your father says nothing more about it, but occasionally you catch him watching you with an expression that might almost be hope. It's been so long since you've seen anything but resignation on his face that the change is startling. By evening, the anticipation has built to a nearly unbearable level. You find yourself watching the window, tracking the fading light, waiting for 9 o'clock to arrive. When it finally does, your father gives a small nod. Your mother hands you a cap to pull low over your face and whispers, "Be careful, be invisible." And then you're out the door, heart pounding, heading for a church basement on Orchard Street and a meeting that might change everything, or cost your family what little security they have left. As you slip past the men watching the building, temporarily distracted by a bottle shared between them, you can't help but wonder, is this a beginning or an end? A chance at something better, or the final mistake that will push your family from merely desperate to truly destitute? The streets of the Lower East Side at night are both terrifying and exhilarating after months confined to a single room. The smells, horse manure, sewage, cooking food, unwashed bodies, assault your senses, but even these are preferable to the constant tobacco that has defined your existence. You move quickly, head down, following the directions your father whispered. 3 blocks east, 2 blocks south, look for the church with the broken step. And as you round the final corner, you see it. A small crowd slipping into a basement entrance, faces tense but determined. People like you. People tired of endless work for pennies. People ready to risk what little they have for the chance at something more. You take a deep breath and follow them down the steps into darkness and possibility. The basement is packed with bodies, the air thick with something unfamiliar, not tobacco for once, but tension, hope, fear, all mixed together in this dim space lit by a few sputtering candles. You find a spot against the back wall, pulling your cap low over your eyes. Most people here are adults, tired-looking men and women with the same tobacco-stained fingers as your parents. A few teenagers, no children. You're the youngest by far, and you try to make yourself invisible, just as your mother instructed. At the front of the room stands a man you've never seen before. He's older, maybe 50, with a thick grey moustache and calloused hands that mark him as a worker, not a boss. When he speaks, it's in Czech, but a different dialect than your family's, probably from Prague, based on the accent. Friends, comrades, thank you for the risk you've taken coming tonight. His voice is low but carries through the room. Everyone leans forward slightly, hanging on each word. We all know why we're here. The conditions are killing us, the wages are starving us, the rents are crushing us, and the bosses, our own countrymen, many of them, are growing fat on our labour. Murmurs of agreement ripple through the crowd. Beside you, a woman nods vigorously, her face thin with hunger, but eyes bright with anger. The American unions have failed us, the man continues. They exclude our women, who are half our workforce. They call us rate busters when we have no choice but to accept what's offered. But together we can form something new, something ours. He holds up a document. This is a charter, a Bohemian Cigar Makers Association. Not just men, everyone who works. One voice, one demand, fair pay for our work. The room erupts in whispers. The idea is radical, revolutionary even. Women in unions, families organising together. It's unheard of. But then again, so is the situation you're all trapped in. Unheard of, inhuman, unbearable. A man near the front stands up. And when they evict us, when they blacklist us, what then, Mr. Dvorak? Dvorak: the name hits you like a punch. This must be a relative of the family upstairs, the son who was taken to the hospital. They can't evict everyone, Dvorak responds. They can't replace all of us at once. That's why we must stand together, all 20 buildings all at once. Another voice: they're already watching. Kaufman had men checking apartments tonight. Of course they're watching, Dvorak says. They're scared. They know their system only works if we're isolated, divided, too afraid to speak. He moves to a small table and unfolds a large paper. Look at these numbers. I've spent months collecting them. You stretch to see. It's a chart of some kind, with figures in neat columns. The average Bohemian family in these tenements makes between $11 and $13 per week making cigars. From this, they pay $10 to $12 in rent. That leaves at most $3 weekly for food, clothes, medicine, everything else. You've never seen the math laid out so starkly before, but it matches exactly what you've lived. The impossible equation of tenement life. Now look here, Dvorak continues. The finished cigars we make sell for between 10 and 30 cents each. 1,000 cigars, which a family might make in a week, sell for between $100 and $300. Yet we receive $3.75 per 1,000. The outrage in the room is palpable. Everyone knew they were being exploited, but seeing the numbers makes it viscerally clear. The factory workers uptown, mostly Americans, make $20 a week for the same work we do for 12. Their union secured this wage. If we organize all Bohemian workers at once, we can demand at least $5 per 1,000. Still far less than fair, but enough to survive on. The meeting continues for another hour. Plans are made. Representatives for each building are chosen. A date is set, 2 weeks from now, for all workers to demand the new rate simultaneously. Papers are distributed with information, figures, demands. You memorize everything, knowing you can't risk taking any papers home. The risk of discovery is too great. As the meeting ends, people file out carefully, leaving in small groups to avoid attention. You wait until most have gone, then slip out and hurry back toward your tenement, mind racing with everything you've heard. The streets feel different now, not just frightening and unknown, but somehow part of a larger world that might, just might, be subject to change. Your family's suffering isn't isolated or unique. It's shared by hundreds, thousands of others, and perhaps together there's strength in that shared experience. When you reach your building, you pause in the shadows, watching. The men who were guarding the entrance earlier are back, passing a bottle between them. You'll never get past them without being seen. Psst, this way. The whisper comes from the alley beside the building. It's Tomash, the boy from the new family. There's another way in, he says, gesturing for you to follow. Through the cellar. You follow him down a narrow passage